All right, guys, you could start.
Hi, good afternoon, class. My name is Marcus Daniel, and I'll be presenting today with my colleague Cohen Miller, right? And the chapter that we'll be covering would be integrity and moral purpose. All right, just to give you a brief overview and some of the objectives of this chapter, right? We'll be reviewing integrity and moral purpose, which entails the following, right? Discussion of the process of creating and sustaining ethical organizational environments, and analysis of the moral dimensions of transforming leadership theories, and an examination of the ethical influences that participants have on their organizations through behavior modeling and practical applications of ethics and leadership using ethical decision making modules. All right, so creating and sustaining ethical organizational environments. Just give me a second, guys. Hold on. All right. In 1990, Nash proposed four qualities that are necessary for participants to advance ethical standards in an organization that they are as follow, right? Critical thinking skills to analyze and convey the ethical components of a problem or dilemma, a high degree of integrity to stand up for your personal and professional ethics, the ability to see situations from others' perspectives, showing concern for others, right, and personal motivation to do the right thing, right? Just to note, when applying these principles, you need to be prepared for criticism. Not everyone will be thinking like yourself, right? But also, we cannot please everyone. And as a leader, we are going to have to make decisions that may not always be right in other person's eyes, but may be the right thing to do at that time. It is all about personal courage, right? These four qualities of leadership, when translated into behavior and action, help create an ethical organizational environment. When you identify a problem as having moral or ethical implications and involve others in the decision making process, you provide another example of how an ethical environment is established. Right? To create an ethical environment, we don't always have to make decisions on our own. Right? Consulting with members in regards to decision making sometimes help people to feel more comfortable and to trust you more. All participants, positional leaders and members alike, should be equally empowered to set a tone in the organization that will foster and support ethical and moral actions. Everyone in the organization needs to be on the same page when it comes to ethical aspects. In regards to ethical aspects, everyone should be involved and operate from a shared set of values that guide the organizational actions, decisions, and activities. In regards to ethical decisions, making it sometimes more productive to get more than one opinion to get a feel for where people are coming from. Appointing one person to be the group's ethics or standards bearer will not achieve the same ethical climate as when all participants are concerned with doing what is right. In fact, it may be counterproductive for a leader to handle ethical dilemmas along with isolation from other members of the organization. That really and truly meaning basically someone shouldn't you should not point if you want everyone to really okay, so in creating the organizational environment, right, we don't just want one person to say, okay, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, right? What Nash was trying to propose was that we shouldn't have one person making the decision. We should include everybody else because at the end of the day, yes, you are the leader, right? But you also want other people. You also need to take into consideration other people's feelings and other people's trends or thoughts. right? Um, to note, right, next point, to note, not all leadership is good. Kelmer in 2004 and Litma Blondman, right? They basically, so Kelmer divided bad leadership into two categories: bad as in ineffective and bad as in unethical, right? Go on, you switch on me there? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about
The
that.
definition of ineffective leadership includes the failure to achieve a desired change, whereas unethical leadership fails to distinguish between right and wrong, right? So you can either be ineffective. So she broke it down basically saying that bad leadership could come in two forms. You could either be an ineffective bad leader. You could either be ineffective or you could be unethical, right? Because someone can be ineffective, but they can be ethical, right? And vice versa, right? Yeah, I think that is. Oh, yeah, that is it for me. There, Cohen. Next slide,
Right.
please.
Good afternoon, class. My name is Kerwin, and I will be continuing with moral purpose as an act of courage. For a leader, it takes personal courage to do the right thing always. The right thing does not always align with an organization's practices, so there is risk involved in showing personal courage and integrity. Thus, moral courage enables leaders to live with integrity, act to uphold the loyalty to their subordinates, and execute their duties with confidence. Subordinates can trust leaders who have the courage to act in accordance with their values because they know that their directives they issue will be honest and based on values. A perfect example of this is if a former executive of a company displayed personal courage when she exposed the breaches of conduct by her boss. In doing so, the former executive risked losing her high level position. Um, but she showed both personal courage and integrity in taking a stance against the unethical practices of the boss. More in depth examination is needed of leaders and participants who are ethical in their dealings and who model good leadership that is moral, courageous, and responsible. Usually, we start searching for ethical leaders who were national or historical figures, but we know leaders with these qualities in our everyday lives, like local business leaders, faculty and administrators, religious leaders from the local community, committed citizens of our neighborhood organizations, your peers, family members, non-profit leaders, who often work quietly and with humility to serve others. Rushwood Kidder describes moral courage as the quality of mind and the spirit that enables one to face up to the ethical challenges firmly and confidently, without flinching or retreating. Moral courage can be viewed as an intersection of three conceptual fields, which are principles, danger, and endurance. A willingness to endure some type of hardship, such as risking losing friends or a job, is a component of moral courage. The opposite would be doing or saying nothing or turning away when faced with ethical dilemmas. Upholding one's principles and putting them into action allow leaders to operate with moral courage. I will now hand you back to Marcus.
Yes, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, the next part I'll be covering, right, will be assumptions about ethical leadership, right? Oh gosh. Lucas Ananello, 1995, right? They proposed 8 assumptions about ethical leadership, which are central themes in the study of practical and ethical leadership. All right, so what I'll do is I'll read out all, and then I'll kind of give you a breakdown of what each of them um means, right? Ethics is the heart of ethics is the heart of leadership. All leadership is value driven. Personal values intersect with organizational values. Ethical leadership can be learned. Ethical leadership involves a connection between ethical through the thought and action, sorry, right? Character development is an essential ingredient of ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is a shared process, and everything we do teaches, right? So, in regards to ethics in the heart of leadership, coolly, so I, I was getting problems pronouncing somebody's names because they kind of difficult. So I hope I'm not butchering the lady name, right? But Celia, 1995, right? She said that ethics is the central issue in leadership. You cannot have a complete discussion about leadership without including the ethical components associated with the leadership process. Okay, so basically, good leadership means leadership that is effective in the that and the goals can be achieved and that follow a sound and ethical process. Right? The second one, all leadership is value driven. Right? We need to reframe leadership so that it represents values that reflect good ethical leadership. Just like so, I had to use my phone. Right. Participants and leaders bring to the organization their own values and beliefs about how people should be treated, notions on what is right versus what is wrong, and ideas about what is just and fair. Organizations and committees are value driven as opposed to value neutral. Right? Value driven basically means that you make decisions based on our values, um, that our values and what we believe in are the core part in our decision making. Whereas value neutral to me, right, can be defined as a situation in which a participant in a controversial situation is impartial and influenced by personal benefits, right? Or attitude, impartial by personal benefits, attitudes, or values because it may be the easier way out, right? Personal values intersect with organizational values, right? The journey to ethical leadership begins with an examination of personal values, as well as ongoing reflection of personal core values and how these values are related to the values of an organization or committee. Right? Your personal moral compass would guide you in wrestling with ethical dilemmas and eventually will point you in the direction of making a decision based on ethical analysis, consideration of opposing viewpoints, your personal values, and the values of your organization. Right? So basically, as a leader, you need to find a way to incorporate your core values along with your members' values to basically mesh everything, right, with the values of the organization that would have been set by the organization. Ethical leadership can be learned. Ethical Ethical learning is a process involving experience, reflection, conceptualization, and application. Right? Trial and error experiences can sharpen your ethical analysis as well as your reflection about notion or what is just and fair in a given situation. You can learn this before you must act or make a decision, right? The life experiences you gain over time will affect your development as an ethical leader. So basically, you're not always going to be right, right? Right? Rome wasn't ready. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So on the road to becoming an ethical leader, right, you're going to make mistakes. But the thing about making mistakes is that you need to pick yourself up, learn from your mistakes, and just be better. do better and be better, right? Ethical leadership involves a connection between ethical thought and action. Linking moral reasoning with values and action is imperative in leadership. The point of this chapter is not to have you memorize dozens of ethical theories. The goal is to engage you in ethical analysis and insights based on theories, concepts applied in real life experiences. Right? Character development is an essential ingredient of ethical leadership. A leader's character is defined by his or her actions and behaviors, not simply by the values that are espoused. Right? Leaders can be popular yet not be respected by the public because they just lack the congruency between what? Yeah, between their values and actions. So in other words, they don't walk the walk. Right? So they will say some, they will, so sorry, they don't walk the walk. They will talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Right? So they will say, you need to be able to, if you say you're going to do something, you need to be able to say, all right, I'm going to do this. I need to be courageous and I need to go out and do it. Right? If it is, once it is the ethically right thing to do. Ethical leadership is a shared process. Members at all levels of an organization or community have an opportunity and responsibility to participate in the process of exercising ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is a shared process, not just the responsibility of a positional leader, like I mentioned earlier. Right? Leaders and participants share the responsibility of advancing core organizational values and of doing the right thing. Members are often called upon to be courageous and to advocate for what is right, despite risks such as losing their job or friends, like Cohen mentioned earlier, right? Organizations that are empowering and inclusive involve members in dealing with these ethical dilemmas and seek their advice to see how best they can resolve these issues or problems that they face, right? Last but not least, in the 8 points, everything we do teaches. Role modeling is a powerful way to influence the ethical climate in families, organizations, and communities. We learn by watching others and we make judgments about what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior in organizations. If any member, including the positional leader, routinely discriminate against other students or members in the recruitment process, then others in the organization, right, the other members underneath the leaders, right, might believe it's acceptable to basically do the same thing and they will treat these students the same way, right? Um, On to the second point, cultural assumption. Hmm. According to Henderson 1992 and Toffler 1986, ethics exist in a cultural context. They are culturally bound or culturally specific. There is no universe, there's no universal agreement on what behaviors or practices are considered appropriate, legal, or ethical across the world. Right? So basically what they were saying is that it have okay, okay, trying to talk. So basically what they were saying is that not all ethics, so something that might be acceptable here may not going to be acceptable in another country and vice versa, right? A cultural assumption is an idea that is common throughout culture. Each culture may have completely different or similar assumptions based on traditional laws and people of that particular place, right? According to Donaldson 1989, right? No, sorry, we're going on to culture tolerance now. I apologize. Right? According to Donaldson 1989, cultural tolerance implies that differences in practices are recognized, but not for the same purpose of imposing or changing the practices to suit a particular culture belief. Right? The goal in comparing culture practices is to understand them, not to judge them as good or bad. Right? So, for example, leaders of multinational business organizations, right? They will need to follow the norms, the laws, and practices of an associated with a different country that they are conducting business for, right? So I believe, yeah, that is it for that chapter. And me, Cohen.
Continuing with ethical theories on moral purposes. The study of human behavior as it relates to ethics and ethical development reaches back to the philosopher kings like Aristotle and Plato, as well as to 18th and 19th century philosophers and scholars such as Immanuel Kant and John Stuart Mill. Ethics is defined as the moral principles that evaluate an individual's behavior or the conduction of an activity. Therefore, the actions taken by different people could be good or bad, depending on the morals that are governing the situation. Ethical theories provide a glimpse into how human judgments are made and the thought processes individuals engage in to solve ethical dilemmas and other problems. Also, ethics help in defining whether an action is fair or unfair, true or false, or how certain behaviors can be morally defined. For example, women in the workplace fail to secure promotions due to their gender and not based on their performance, which is unfair. Good leadership will be not to overlook someone based on their gender. Under transforming leadership theory, James McGregor Burns has written the playbook, which involves a strong element of ethics and morals. According to Burns, transforming leadership is when leaders and followers raise one another to a higher level of motivation and morality. Transforming leadership reaches moral dimensions when mutual influences elevate the behavior and ethical aspirations that a leader and a participant possess. Transforming leadership involves persuasion, a desire to change something, and multi-directional influence relationship between leaders and participants. In any leadership position, participants can often influence leaders to higher ethical ends. Values or ideals such as peace, justice, fairness, liberty, equal opportunity, and people's general welfare are expressed by transformational leaders. Burns labeled these ideals as end values. Leaders, superiors, participants, peers, followers all influence these values through specific behaviors. Key factors about the transforming leadership theory are about the relationship and influence between leaders and followers. Burns describes this symbiotic relationship as an interaction of power and shared values. It is the power of a person to become a leader armed with principles and rising above self-interest, narrowly conceived with that invest that persons with power and may ultimately transform both leaders and followers into persons who jointly adhere to moral values and end values. The moral purposes of both leaders and participants are the key factors in transforming the leadership process. Transformational leaders do not need to make popular decisions to be liked. They can lead with moral purpose and still be respected as a leader. For example, the president of a senior council decided to follow her school's alcohol policy and not permit members to take cases of beer on the retreat, even though the membership had unanimously voted to take the alcohol on the retreat. In this case, the president decided to do what was right despite popular sentiment and knowing that most people would be upset with her decision. I will now hand you back to Marcus.
Sorry. So next we'll be dealing with modeling a moral purpose. Right? Sims and Lorenzi, 1992, stated that if participants admire or identify with one another member, right, or leader, they will be more likely to imitate that person's behavior. Right? Um, Bandura, 1977, right, the pioneer of social learning theories, believed that people can learn indirectly from observation or by vicarious learning. Vicarious learning or behavioral modeling has important implications for the leadership process. Organizational and community members can learn ethical practices by observing those who model these practices in their leadership approach, right? So, vicarious learning, right, is basically, well, from what I understood through learning it, from doing my little research, what research I did, right? Vicarious learning is basically how we will say in Trinidad on the job training, right? For example, um, excuse me, yeah, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. So, for example, like I was saying, for example, in Trinidad, right? An example of vicarious learning might be like if you go to Republic Bank, right? You will normally see the, if you go to a teller, right? You will see sometimes they'll have the trainees there, right? And it will be real. It's just, I believe it's really for them to just get a hands-on feel for what it is your duties will be. You okay, cool? Yeah, what
Yeah.
it is their duties, yeah, what their duties will be, right? Andrew Ho, a graduate from the University of Maryland with a degree in finance, right, who also received a citation in the a citation in the College Park Scholarship Public Leadership Program. He made a statement. He said, "I handled ethical dilemmas by examining the situation, weighing the pros and cons, and evaluating the situation against my personal ethical morals and values. I believe that I believe the most helpful thing in handling ethical dilemmas is to know yourself well, right? Know what your moral values and ethics are, and gain some practice in handling ethical dilemmas. That way, you will have the courage to stand by what you believe in when dealing with ethical dilemmas, right? Some of these, one of the examples, right, of basically model modeling a moral purpose, right, was there was this time where well, I play rugby for Caribs, right? And there was this one time where one of the kids I trained the young boys, right? And there's this one time where this they come from school, so normally training would be Tuesday and Thursday. So the boys will normally come after school to training, right? And there was this one boy. He was, we could say, you could basically say he was the star. He was the most developed on the team. Um, and the other boys will come. They will travel along from school, and they will come down. And training will start at 5, right? And when 5 o'clock will reach, 20 past 5, half past 5 will reach, and he will not be strolling on, right? So I asked the boys at time, how come it is he's becoming down so late? And basically what he was saying is that he's basically go out and he will go down in town and he will lime and whatever, and he will lime and he will come when he feel like coming, right? And to me, ethically, that was wrong in a sense where yes, you're the star player, and yes, you know you're the best, right? But at the same time, you're not. It's not the rugby is a team sport. It's not just you alone. It's not like track or something like that. You can't be bigger than the game, right? So what happened is that every time you come late, right? What I'll do is I will track down the amount of minutes you came late, right? And when the season started, right, I basically deducted all the time that he came late. So if you come half an hour, I'll mark down half an hour Tuesday. You come 20 minutes, I'll mark down 20 minutes on Thursday, right? So that'll be 50 minutes, right? So that's 50 minutes of playing time he not gonna get, right? And for the entire season, he came late. I didn't say anything. He came late for the entire season, right? For the entire preseason, sorry. And when the season started, he gears up. The first game he gears up, and he said, "All right, cool." So when he called out the starting team, he wasn't there. So he was like, Marcus, how come I'm not on the team? I'm not on the starting team." I say, "Well, you feel again, a sense that you're feeling like you're bigger than the game, right? Your teammates, and I don't take it as they snitching or anything, right? Because I asked them why it is you would come to training late, and he was like, they would tell me that you would go down in tongue and you were lying, right? And are they lying? And he was like, nah, not really. I was like, okay, so basically you're just doing what you want, right? So I started deducting. What I'm going to do is every time that you come late, I mark down the amount of time that you come late, right? And the amount of time that you was reach late, you're not gonna play. So you basically didn't play that season, right? And everybody was kind of sour because they lost a couple games and everybody believed that if he played in those games, right, they would have done better, right? But as a leader, sometimes you need to make a ethic. You need to stand your ground and what you believe in, right? Is you need to make an example sometimes for me, right? Because after that season, the next season, everybody was early. That might have been the following preseason. That might have been the best attendance we had for the past 5 years. Everybody was early. Everybody gears up. Everybody going out in the training field before training, warming up and getting ready. Right. Another example, right, would be participants also model behavior that inspire leaders' ethical awareness. Right. For example, the members of a student-owned food cooperative the members of a student food company influence the student manager to use empathy in dealing whether to dismiss an employee who missed work 3 days in a row to care for his ill elderly grandmother. The members asked the manager to consider the fact that the employee was putting himself through school and that he was the only relative who could care for his grandmother. They suggested that the manager revise the work schedule, right, to allow the employee time to help his grandmother and still maintain some hours at the corporation. In this example, the members were modeling empathy. The members were modeling how empathy can be used by putting themselves in the employee situation, their fellow employee situation, right, and realizing that what the impact of the dismissal would have been. Um, Go ahead, Cohen. Back to you.
Right. Continuing with moral talk. Leaders and participants would benefit by engaging in conversations that allow people to explore the moral complexities and dimensions of problems and dilemmas. Frederick Bird and James A. Waters provide an interesting notion of modeling or influencing ethical behavior through verbal exchanges or moral talk or dialogical leadership. The dialogical leader initiates discussions with peers and members about what is ethical and what the material interests of individuals are. Dialogical leadership or moral talk can be used in student organizations to model ethical approaches and to help create and sustain an ethical environment. For example, a student body president includes on the meeting agenda a discussion about students asking former students for exam answers. She then asks the members if this is the kind of activity students should be engaging in, as it is breaking the college rules. Individuals often hesitate to participate in moral talk or discussions about ethical dilemmas. Although the topic of ethics is encountered by individual leaders and participants, little to no discussions about ethics take place among group members. Birds and Waters referred to this lack of discussion as moral muteness. Reasons for this lack of discussion include refraining from complex issues with moral overtones, or the leader protecting their managerial flexibility with solving problems, avoiding dealing with varying ideological or moralistic perspectives. Reason for this lack of discussion include refraining from sorry, it is the shared responsibility of members and leaders to initiate moral talk and to avoid moral muteness. Moral expressions can start feelings of connection with moral action. The modeling effect will only happen when the language in moral talk relates to experiences and expectations of people involved in the organization. I will now hand you back to Marcus.
All right, guys. We'll be dealing with ethical decision making models. Right, the leadership process is filled with daily ethical dilemmas and problems that do not have sorry, and problems that do not have readily identifiable solutions, and that leaders and participants need to confront and resolve. Right, following the relational leadership module, it is not solely on the leader to make ethical decisions. Both the leader and the members need to come together and find a common ground to resolve matters. The relational leadership method emphasizes on inclusive and process oriented leadership to achieve results for the common good. This suggests that leaders and members both be included in addressing ethical dilemmas. Right? There are several approaches you can use to resolve ethical dilemmas. Bearing in mind some situations, it may not be ethically correct to follow these methods. For example, depending on the job or status of specific people, there may be a strict client confidentiality. For example, a doctor or a lawyer or even a priest, right? But sometimes these confidentiality clauses can be breached, right? Where they may feel that the person, right, may be putting themselves in harm's way, right? Bechamp and Childress, 1979, and Kitchener, 1984, right? They made a statement like leadership, ethics is not a neat and tidy concept. Not all situations can be resolved by application of professional code or organizational standards, sorry. It requires human judgment and analysis to even determine whether a situation represents an ethical dilemma or something else. For instance, a personality conflict between two members. We need to note that there are multiple modules that we can use to guide us in our ethical decision making, but we should not only follow one model stringently, right? We should be open minded to all models and modify them to suit our needs to know what will work best for us because not all situations will be the same. We need to understand that not everything is black and white and there would be some gray areas. Right, I will pass you on to Cohen now.
Continuing with practical applications. Ethical decision-making modules encourage people to work through dilemmas with a moral purpose in mind and provide frameworks with which to guide decision-making and analysis. Rather than react quickly to dilemmas, you should carefully consider various steps, including ethical analysis, towards making sound decisions. Rashid Kedar defines tough choices as those that pit one right value against another. The tough choice is not based upon right versus wrong, rather, it entails right versus right. It is a genuine dilemma because both points are based on our moral core values. An ethical dilemma, then, is one of those right versus right situations in which two core moral values come into conflict. Kedar provides a framework for examining right versus right choices using a four dilemma paradigm model: justice versus mercy, fairness and equity conflict with compassion, empathy, and love; short term versus long term, immediate needs to run counter to future goals; individual versus community, self versus others, or small group versus larger group; truth versus loyalty, honesty competes with commitment, responsibility, or promise keeping. Example of truth versus loyalty is knowing that you have a family member that committed a crime and reporting them to the police. Basically, if you report them to the police, you're sending your own blood to jail. But I mean, at the end of the day, is the right thing to do. KEDA also provides three principles for ethical decision making. Ends-based thinking is doing whatever produces the greatest good for the greatest number. Rule-based thinking is to follow only the principle that you want everyone else to follow. Care-based thinking is putting love for others first. These three principles can be applied in examining dilemmas as you begin to work through their complexities and decide the right course of action. An effective approach is to use each of these three principles before deciding or taking an action. I will now pass you back to Marcus.
All right, guys. This was the last point in the chapter: ethical principles and standards. Right. So, ethical principles and standards are guidelines that should help you determine the correct course of action and should have bearing on how your decisions affect others. Right. B. Champ and Childress, again, 1979, they proposed five principles of biomedical ethics, which were later adapted by Karen Stoham Kitchener, right, a professor of education for the council. Okay, I'm not to go. For the counseling psychology field. These five ethical principles are respecting anatomy, doing no harm, benefiting others, being just, and being faithful. As a leader or member, you can use these five principles illustrated as a critical evaluating process to moral reasoning and ethical decision making. Right? One of the examples, so in regards to those five principles that they came up with, right? I can give you an example where you can where these were used, right? Let's just say that you are the chair of a homecoming committee and that the promotion subcommittee designed homecoming t-shirts that you find to be offensive to ethnic groups, right? The committee spent $10,000 on these shirts, which are being sold by the organizational members. The same $10,000 must, of course, be replaced by the budget in the budget by the t-shirt sales. Which of these five principles would you use in working through the dilemma? Do any of the principles clash with each other, such as respecting the anatomy of the committee and doing no harm to others who might be hurt by the symbolism of the t-shirt? Right? Um, Number two, what are the reasons for these codes of ethics? Right? The Center for the Study of Ethics in the Profession. in the professions have gathered over 850 of these ethics for a wide range of professions, including law, government, engineering, the healthcare industry, sports, fraternal social organizations, and the media, to name a few. Right? So, on top of the five that, um, sorry, so on top of the five from Champ and Childress, right? They came up with over 850, right? What I'll do is I can put I'll forgot to put the link in the PowerPoint if you guys might be interested, right? They actually have ethics for all kinds of stuff. They have it for even agriculture, right? And you guys could just, if you like, you could just take a look at it, right? We need to slow down and not rush to make hasty decisions. Implement the newspaper test, right? Basically, what the newspaper test is before you go and you rush and you make a hasty decision, right? Look at it in the sense where, okay, I'm going to make this decision. If it was to end up in the Newsday or the Guardian, sorry, if it was to end up in the Newsday or the Guardian, how would I feel for that to be out to the public and for everyone to basically see the decision that I made, right? And that's it for ethical principles and standards.
So, in summary, Chapter 6, Integrity and Moral Purpose, has taught us the following. Leading with integrity is a complex process that includes the moral development of an individual, the influence of role models, values-driven leadership, and the organizational environment. The process of developing into an ethical participant and creating ethical environments does not occur overnight. Raising questions around ethical issues is a fundamental component of leading with integrity. People who lead with moral purpose often have as many questions as answers. Leading from the relational leadership model means leading with moral purpose. The world would be a better place if everyone strives to create and maintain an ethical environment by rewarding ethical acts, engaging in moral talk, and working as a group to resolve dilemmas by using decision-making models. So that is the end of our presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, if there are no questions, I will pause the recording.